They took my sword first. Not my name, not my post, not my freedom. Those came after in that order over the 3 days that followed, but the sword first. And I have thought about that a great deal since. Because a sword is the cheapest thing a guard owns, and they took it as though it were the dangerous part of me. When the dangerous part of me was the thing I would not say, the reason, the why. The one sentence that could have ended the whole business in a breath, and that I swallowed instead. And am only now, here in this cold room, with you writing it all down, beginning to let out. So write it down. I will tell it the way it happened, and you can decide what kind of woman refuses the king's own consort entry to a house at midnight and stands there while they strip the braid off her shoulder. I have decided already. I decided that night. But you weren't there, and your masters weren't there, and so I will put you there as best I can because I am tired, and because I think that if I tell it right, even you will understand, and maybe one of you will carry the why up the stairs to the people who should hear it, since I cannot. My name is Renna Veld. I was a sentry of the House of Harrowmere, in the crown realm of Caldenreach, 14 years on the walls and the gates and the long night corridors, and I was not an ambitious woman. I want that understood first, because the story that is being told about me up the stairs is a story about ambition, about a low guard who got above herself, who thought her own judgment finer than her betters, and that story is wrong. It is exactly wrong. It is the opposite of what happened, and I would rather you heard the right one even if it ends the same way for me. I never wanted a captaincy. I never wanted to be noticed. I wanted the wall, the cold, the quiet, the small honest work of standing where I was told to stand and keeping out what I was told to keep out. That is all I ever wanted. And on the one night it mattered, I did exactly that. I kept out what I had been told to keep out, and it is going to cost me everything, and I would do it again. And that is the part you will not understand until the end, so be patient with me. Let me tell you about the house. They had been married 11 days. The Prince Aldrich, the king's second son, though the second son of a king in Caldenreach is closer to the throne than you'd think, given how the first son had turned out. But that is another story and not mine to tell. The Prince Aldrich and his new bride, the Princess Sella, had been given a residence of their own. This was a thing of some weight. A married prince does not stay in his father's apartments. He is given a house, a household, a small court of his own, the first ground that is truly his. And the night they first sleep under their own roof is a night that means something, in the old way, the way these things still mean something to people like me who grew up on the stories, even if the great folk have half forgotten. The house was called the Lantern House, an old name, from when it had held the watchfire that signaled the river crossing, before the crossing moved and the fire went cold, and the place became just another fine residence inside the palace walls. I had served at the Lantern House before, years back when it stood empty between occupants, and I knew its corridors, its bad door that swelled in the wet and had to be shouldered, its one stair that announced every footfall no matter how soft you came. I knew the house. That mattered later. It is part of the why. I was given the night watch at the inner door on their first night. The inner door, not the gate, not the outer hall, but the last door. The one that opens onto the private stair that goes up to the apartments where the prince and princess would sleep. It is the most trusted post in the house and the most boring, because nothing ever comes to the inner door. Everything is stopped long before, at the gate, at the hall, by the guards below. By the time a thing reaches the inner door, it has already been judged safe a dozen times over, and the sentry there is the last formality, the final still figure standing between the household and its own bedchambers. They gave me that post because I knew the house and because I was steady and because, I think, because someone wanted a quiet, reliable nobody at the one door where nothing would happen, on a night when the great folk wanted no trouble. A wedding night, more or less. The first night of a marriage in its own home. You put your dullest, most dependable sentry at the inner door and you forget about her. And that is what they did, and that is what I was, the dull, dependable nobody, and I would have stood there all night and seen nothing and been forgotten by morning, except for what came up the stair toward me a little before midnight. But before I tell you what came, I have to tell you about the order, because the order is everything. The order is the spine of this whole thing, and they have not let me speak of it properly. They keep stopping me. They keep saying that is not relevant. Sentry, answer the question put to you. And so I have not been able to say it, and I am going to say it now to you slowly, and you are going to write all of it. 3 days before the wedding, I was called not by my own captain, which was the first strangeness. I was called by the Princess Sella's own man, not the prince's household, hers. She had brought a small household with her into the marriage, as a princess does, a few servants and one guard of her own, an older man named Corwin who had been with her since she was a girl in her father's house across the water. And it was Corwin who called me, 3 days before the wedding, into a small cold room off the laundry stair where no one goes, and shut the door, and told me a thing that I have carried like a stone in my chest ever since. I will tell you what he told me, but not yet. I am sorry. You will think I am being cruel, drawing it out, and maybe I am. Maybe 14 years of standing silent in cold corridors makes a woman want, just once, to be the one who decides when the thing gets said. But there is also a reason of the heart, which is that once I tell you the order, you will understand everything, and the not understanding is the only thing I have left to give you of what that night was actually like. The night itself, lived forward, not knowing how it ends. So let me keep you in it a moment longer. Let me keep you standing at the inner door with me in the dark, not yet knowing why, the way I stood. The lantern house at night is very quiet. That is the first thing. The palace proper never sleeps. There is always somewhere the clatter of a kitchen or the change of a watch or some lord coming home loud from somewhere he shouldn't have been. But the lantern house sits apart, behind its own wall, down its own short avenue of old limes, and at night the noise of the palace falls away and you can hear the house itself, the settling of old timber, the wind finding the gaps it always finds, the river faintly, that no longer runs where the watchfire once pointed, but still runs somewhere out beyond the wall, a sound under all the other sounds. I stood at the inner door with one lamp turned low beside me, because a sentry at the inner door does not need to see, she needs to be seen, a still shape that says the household is kept, and the low lamp threw my shadow long up the private stair, and I watched my own shadow lie there on the steps, and I thought about nothing in particular. The cold came up through the stone the way it always does in those old houses, up through the boots, into the knees. I shifted my weight the way you learn to heel, to keep the blood moving. Somewhere above me, behind a door at the top of the stair, the prince and princess were in their first night in their own home, and I did not think about them either, because it was not my business to. Because a sentry who thinks about what happens behind the doors she guards does not last 14 years. I am lying a little. I did think about them once early in the watch. I thought, I hope they are kind to each other. That is all. A foolish small thought, the kind you'd never say aloud. I had seen the Princess Sella only twice, both times at a distance, a slight pale young woman with a stillness about her that I had taken, the first time, for coldness, and understood the second time was something else, something closer to the stillness of a creature that has learned to go very quiet because quiet is safer. I did not know her. But I had taken that order from her man 3 days before, and an order shared in a cold room behind a shut door makes a kind of bond, even when you don't understand it, even when it frightens you. And so when I thought I hope they are kind to each other, I was thinking mostly of her. I will admit that. It matters, I think, to the why. And then I heard the footsteps on the stair. Not the private stair above me, the public stair below, the one that comes up from the outer hall, the one that announces every footfall because of the loose third step that has announced footfalls since before I was born. I heard the third step speak, that particular complaint of old wood, and I came out of my nothing thoughts all at once the way you do, every part of me awake, because someone was coming up to the inner door a little before midnight on the first night, and nothing was supposed to come to the inner door ever. That was the whole nature of the post. I heard them before I saw them, and there were several, not one person, a group, 4 or 5, moving with the particular unhurried weight of people who are used to doors opening for them. And then the lamp at the turn of the stair caught them, and I saw who it was, and my stomach went down through the cold floor and kept going. Because of all the people in Caldenreach who might have come up that stair, it was the one the order was about. It was her, the Lady Camilla. I should tell you who she was, in case you are somehow a stranger to this court, though I cannot imagine they would send me a stranger to write down my crimes. The Lady Camilla was the king's consort. Not the queen had been dead 9 years, and the king had never remarried, but he had taken the Lady Camilla into his household and into his confidence and into, everyone understood though no one said, every other part of his life, and she had become, over those 9 years, the most powerful woman in the realm without ever once holding a title that said so. She ran the inner household. She decided who saw the king and who waited, and who was quietly told the king was indisposed and would not be seeing them at all this year or ever. She was clever and she was charming when charm served, and she was, beneath both, as hard as the river stone the palace was built on, and everyone, from the lowest scullion to the highest lord, everyone in that palace had learned the single most important rule of survival under the king, which was that you did not cross the Lady Camilla. You did not refuse her. You did not delay her. You did not stand in her way. Doors opened for her or the doors were removed, and so, often, was whoever had failed to open them. And here she was, at the foot of my stair, a little before midnight, with 4 of her own people behind her, come to the inner door of the Lantern House on the first night of the prince and princess's marriage. Come to go up to them. And I knew, the moment I saw her, with a certainty that arrived in my body before it reached my mind, that I was going to have to do the thing the order told me to do. I was going to have to refuse her. Renna Veld, dull, dependable nobody, 14 years on the cold walls, was going to have to stand at the top of those 3 stairs and tell the most dangerous woman in the realm that she could not pass. My hands, I remember my hands. They had gone numb, and not from the cold. I remember thinking, absurdly, of a thing my mother used to say, something about how your body knows before you do, and I remember being almost angry at the thought for arriving just then, of all the useless times for my dead mother's voice to turn up. And I remember the smell of her, the Lady Camilla's, as she came up, some scent she wore, something with smoke in it and something sweet under the smoke, a costly smell, a smell that I would now, if I were a free woman, cross a street to avoid for the rest of my life. She came up the stairs into the lamplight, and she looked at me, the still dull shape at the door, and she did not even slow, because why would she? Doors opened for her, and she expected me to be a door. I was not a door. That night I was a wall, and I am going to tell you why I am. I promise you, we are almost there, but first I need you to feel the size of what I was being asked to do, by an order from a frightened girl's old guard, given in a cold room 3 days before. I need you to understand that every part of my 14 years, every instinct trained into my body, every story I had ever heard of what happened to people who refused the Lady Camilla, all of it was screaming at me, in that moment, to step aside, to be the door, to let her pass and keep my sword and my name and my post and my freedom, and to let whatever happened up those stairs be none of my business, the way nothing behind a guarded door is ever the sentry's business. And I did not step aside. I want you to write that down exactly. She came up the last stair and I moved, but not aside. I moved to the center of the door and I put my hand up, palm out, the way you stop a thing that must be stopped, and I said the words I had been dreading for 3 days, the words that ended my life as I had known it. I said, "My lady, I'm sorry, you can't go up tonight." And the quiet that came after that, I have never heard a quiet like it, and I have stood a great many silent watches. It was the quiet of a thing that has never happened beginning to happen. It was the quiet of 4 of her people not breathing. It was the quiet of the Lady Camilla, the most powerful woman in the realm, turning her full attention onto a nobody for the first time in her life, and finding, where a door should have been, a wall. "Write it down, then I will tell you why." She didn't shout. I think that surprised me most. I had braced for the shout you brace for the thing you've seen before, and I'd seen the Lady Camilla take the skin off a steward once in the long gallery over a thing so small I've forgotten what it was, her voice going up and up until the man was gray. And so I had braced for that, for the rising voice, for the public unmaking. It didn't come. She just stopped. She looked at my hand, the palm out, the stupid trembling palm, and then she looked at my face slowly, the way you look at a thing you're deciding whether to remember. And when she spoke, her voice was very quiet and very pleasant, which was so much worse than the shout that I felt my legs go loose under me. She said my refusal back to me as a question, almost gently, giving me the chance. That's what the gentleness was. It was a door she was opening for me, a last door. Step back through this and we'll both pretend none of it happened. She asked if I understood who she was, and I said yes, my lady. And she asked, still gentle, still pleasant, whether I understood that the prince was her own dear stepson in all but name, that she had known him since he was a boy, that she had come at this late hour only out of love, to wish the new household well on its first night under its own roof. A small kindness, a family thing, nothing more, and didn't I feel now that she'd explained it, that I had perhaps made a small mistake, the kind of mistake a tired sentry makes at midnight, the kind that's forgotten by morning if it's mended quickly. And here is a thing I have to confess to you because I said I would tell it true. For one breath, one whole breath, I believed her, or I wanted to. The gentleness, the reasonableness, the warm family picture she painted, the easy road back to my quiet life that she was laying out in front of me step by step. For one breath I thought, I have made a terrible mistake. She only means kindness. Step aside, Renna, step aside and keep your life. Because that is what she was, you understand. That was her gift. She could make the wrong thing feel like the only sane thing. She could make a wall feel ashamed of being a wall. And standing there in the lamplight with her pleasant voice washing over me, I felt the order I'd been given start to seem mad, paranoid, the fever dream of a frightened girl's old servant. And I felt myself begin to lean back, to soften, to become a door after all. And then I remembered the cold room behind the laundry stair, and Corwin's face, and what he had told me, and I stopped leaning. I will tell you now. I have made you wait long enough and myself longer. 3 days before the wedding, the Princess Sella's man Corwin called me into that cold room and shut the door, and he was not calm. That is the thing I noticed first, because Corwin was an old guard, the kind you and I both recognize, 30 years on some other house's walls across the water, a man who did not rattle. And he was rattled. His hands kept moving. He kept going to the door and listening at it and coming back. And he told me, in a low, fast voice, the voice of a man saying a thing he has decided to say and is frightened of having decided. He told me that the Princess Sella was afraid for her life, and that she believed the danger would come on the first night in the lantern house, and that it would come wearing the face of kindness, and that it would come from the Lady Camilla. I did not believe him. I want you to know I did not simply swallow it. I am not a woman who loves a conspiracy. I have seen too many of them turn out to be someone's indigestion and someone else's ambition. I asked him hard questions. I asked him why. And Corwin told me the why, and the why is the thing I have not been allowed to say up the stairs, the thing your masters do not want said, and I am going to say it to you now, and you are going to write it, and you are going to carry it up, because someone has to. The marriage was a problem. Not for the prince loved her. Anyone could see that. The Prince Aldrich had married Sella for the plain old reason that he wanted to, and was prince enough to get his way over the objections. And there had been objections. The marriage was a problem because of what it did to the line. Sella was not nobody. She was the daughter of a house across the water with a claim, an old, thin, mostly forgotten claim, but a real one, to lands that the king had spent 20 years quietly bringing under Caldenreach's crown. And a son of Sella's body, a child of the Prince Aldrich and the Princess Sella, would unite the prince's nearness to the throne with Sella's old claim across the water, and would be, in the cold arithmetic of these things, a child who threatened a great many arrangements that the Lady Camilla had spent 9 years building. The king was old. The first son was, as I said, another story, but not a son anyone wanted on the throne, and everyone knew it. The Lady Camilla's whole power, her whole future, every arrangement she had made for the day the old king finally died, rested on the succession going a certain way, and a child of Sella's body would unmake all of it. So the marriage could be permitted, the prince had forced that, but a child could not be allowed to come. And the surest way to be certain no child ever came, Corwin said, his voice dropping so low I had to lean in, was for the Princess Sella not to survive long in Caldenreach. An accident, an illness, a grief, even a young bride, frail, far from home, who did not thrive in the cold river air and faded sadly before she could give the prince an heir. These things happen. These things are made to happen by people clever enough, and the Lady Camilla was the cleverest and hardest person in the realm, and she had every reason, and the first night in the Lantern House, the one night the great folk had decided would be left private, undisturbed, lightly guarded, a wedding night, nothing to see, the first night was when a clever person would do it, while everyone's eyes were politely turned away. And Corwin could not stop it himself, because he was hers, known to be hers, the princess's man, and he would be the first one moved aside, the first one given some errand, some other post on that night, which, I learned later, is exactly what happened. Corwin was sent down to the river gate on the first night, far from the apartments, on an order that came from nowhere anyone could name, so he could not be the wall. He needed a wall who was not known to be the princess's, a wall already posted at the inner door by the household itself, a wall who would simply, quietly, on her own apparent judgment, refuse the one person who must not be allowed up. He needed me, the dull, dependable nobody at the inner door. He had chosen me 3 days before and given me the order and the why, and asked me, not commanded, asked, because he had no power to command me, asked me to hold the door on the first night against the Lady Camilla. No matter what she said, no matter how reasonable, no matter the cost, because the cost to me, whatever it was, would be less than the cost to the frightened girl at the top of the stair. That is the order, that is the why, write it down. The Lady Camilla did not come up the stair on the first night out of love. She came up to do the thing that a child of that marriage required be done, and she came up gentle and kind and reasonable, because gentle and kind and reasonable is how the worst things come. And I knew it, because Corwin had told me 3 days before in a cold room. And so when she stood in front of me and opened that last door of reasonableness, and invited me to step back through it and keep my life, I remembered, and I did not step back through. I said it again. You can't go up tonight, my lady. And I added the only other thing I said to her that whole night, the thing I had decided in advance to say, because Corwin and I had agreed I must never once speak the real reason aloud. Speaking it would mean my death within the day and the princess's soon after, by some other road. So I gave her instead the small lie that was also, in its way, the truest thing, the thing a sentry is for. I said, my orders are that no one goes up tonight. No one. I'm sorry, my lady, not tonight. It wasn't true that I had such an order from the household. I had no such order. The only order I had was Corwin's, the asking in the cold room. But standing there I made it true the only way it could be made true, by being the one who would not move, and a sentry who will not move is, in the end, indistinguishable from an order, which is the whole secret of what we are, you and I, the people on the cold side of the doors. She looked at me for a long, long time. The lamp guttered once. There was a draft from the bad door downstairs, the one that never sat right in its frame, and the light jumped on her face, and in the jumping light I saw her understand something. Not the why, I'm fairly sure she never knew that I knew the why, and that ignorance may be the only reason I am alive to tell you this instead of dead in a ditch beyond the wall. What she understood was simpler and worse for me. She understood that I was not going to move. That the gentleness had failed, the reasonableness had failed, the warm family picture had failed, that this nobody at the door had become, for reasons the Lady Camilla could not fathom, immovable, and that she, the most powerful woman in the realm, was going to have to either retreat down the public stair in front of 4 of her own people, defeated by a sentry, or escalate to force, in a house full of the prince's own guards, on the prince's wedding night, where any noise, any struggle, any drawn blade would bring the whole household down on her, and turn her quiet errand into a loud catastrophe witnessed by everyone. She had come to do a silent thing. I had made it impossible to do silently. That was the whole of my victory, and it was enough. She didn't escalate. She was far too clever to escalate. She stood there a moment longer, and then she smiled at me, and I will see that smile when I die, whenever that is. It is waiting for me at the end like a coat hung by a door. She smiled, and she said softly that she would remember me. Just that. I'll remember you. And she turned, and she went back down the public stair with her 4 people behind her, unhurried, as though she had only ever come up to glance at the house and had seen all she needed to see. And the loose 3rd step spoke under her foot, once, going down, and then she was gone, and the smell of smoke and sweetness hung in the stairwell after her like something that wouldn't leave. And I stood at the inner door, shaking, for the rest of the night, and nothing else came up the stair, and in the morning the Princess Sella was alive. That is the part I hold on to in here in the cold, while your masters decide what to do with me. In the morning she was alive. Whatever it costs me, and it is going to cost me everything, I have no illusions. The Lady Camilla remembers me exactly as she promised, and the charge they have built is a clever one, and I will not walk out of this room a free woman. Whatever it costs, in the morning the girl at the top of the stair was alive, and is alive now as I tell you this, and there is a child coming, I am told, in the spring. A child of that marriage, the very thing. So write it down, all of it. The order, the why, the smoke and the sweetness, the smile, the loose 3rd step. Write down that the sentry who refused the Lady Camilla did not do it out of ambition or madness or insolence. Write down that she did it because an old frightened guard asked her to, in a cold room, 3 days before, and because she believed him, and because in the end she decided that a girl's life was worth more than her own, which is, I always thought, the entire point of standing at a door with a sword. We are told it our whole service, we just so rarely get asked to mean it. You've stopped writing. I noticed a while ago, if I'm honest. Somewhere around the cold room, the order, you stopped, and you've just been listening, your hands still on the table, and that's all right, I'm not angry. I'd have stopped writing too if I were you, because what I've told you is not the kind of thing a person writes down lightly. It names the Lady Camilla in a plot of murder against the prince's wife. A guard who writes that down has chosen a side. So I understand the stillness of your hands. I have been a guard a long time. I know what it looks like when a person realizes that the thing in front of them is heavier than the job they came in to do. But I'm going to ask you to look at me now, because I've been telling this whole story to the side of your face, and there's a thing I want to see when I say the last of it. There, thank you. I knew, you see, I knew before you came in. They don't tell a prisoner much, but they don't have to, because a guard learns to read a building the way you read a face, and this building has been talking all morning. The extra men in the lower corridor, the captain who would not meet my eye when they brought me down, the fact that I was moved last night from the common cells to this room, this private cold room with a table and 2 chairs and no window, the kind of room you put a person in when the conversation that's coming is not meant to be overheard. And the fact that they sent me someone to write it all down, that, most of all, they don't write down the words of a guard who's going to be quietly disgraced and turned out the gate. There's no record made of a nobody. You make a record when the record is going to matter. You make a record when someone, somewhere up the stairs, has decided they need the whole truth set down in a sentry's own words, in a private room, by a careful hand, not to bury it, to use it. So I knew, when you came in with your paper and your steady patience, and your way of not quite telling me who sent you, I knew you were not the Lady Camilla's. Hers would not have let me near the Y. Hers would have stopped me the way they've stopped me all week. That's not relevant, Sentry, answer the question. You let me talk. You let me reach the cold room and the order and her name. A person who lets a prisoner reach the dangerous truth is a person who came to collect the dangerous truth. And there is only one household in Caldenreach that would want the Lady Camilla's first night unmade and written down in a sentry's own honest voice, by someone they trusted to carry it back up the stairs intact. You're the prince's, aren't you? You don't have to answer. Your hands answered for you the way mine would, the way ours always do. You're his or you're hers, the princess's, and it comes to the same thing now, since the prince and princess have become, these last weeks, very much the same thing. Two frightened young people who have worked out that the only safety in that palace is each other. They sent you to me. To get it all down before the Lady Camilla's clever charge can have me ended, so that what I saw and what I held doesn't die in this room with a disgraced nobody. They sent you to make me a witness instead of a corpse. I have to sit a moment. I'm sorry. It's the relief, I think. I've held this for 3 days believing I was telling it to my own grave, and to find at the end that I was telling it to a door that opens, that's a harder thing to take than despair. Despair you can lean on. Hope buckles your knees. Let me finish, then. Properly for the record, since it turns out there is to be a record. I, Renna Veld, Sentry of the House of Harrowmere, refused the Lady Camilla entry to the Lantern House on the first night of the Prince Aldrich's marriage to the Princess Sella. I did it knowingly. I did it because I had been warned 3 days prior by the princess's man Corwin that the Lady Camilla intended the princess's death that night, dressed as a midnight kindness, in order to prevent a child of the marriage that would threaten her arrangements for the succession. I had no written order. I had only the asking of a frightened old guard and my own judgment, and I weighed my life against the princess's, and I chose the princess's, and I would choose it again, and I am at peace with what it costs me. Let that be set down in my own words. Let it go up the stairs. And write this part too. This is for the prince. You'll know whether to give it to him. Tell him I'm sorry it had to be a stranger at his door on his first night, and not someone he'd chosen, someone he trusted. He should have been able to trust his own first night to his own people. That he couldn't, that the danger was already inside the walls, already in the family, already wearing the face of kindness. That's the real wound, and it won't close just because I held one door one night. The Lady Camilla is still up there. She'll find another night, another road, a slower one. He should know that. The door I held buys them time, not safety. There's a difference, and people in this palace forget it. They think a held door is the end of a story when it's only ever the beginning of the next one. Tell him to spend the time well. Tell him to get his wife somewhere with her own walls and her own people, and a sentry at the inner door who he chose himself and would die for him. Tell him the cold rooms behind laundry stairs are where this realm actually decides things, not the throne room, and he should put his own people in the cold rooms before she fills them all with hers. That's all, that's the whole of it. You can stop being still now. You can pick up your paper. I find I'm not afraid anymore, which is strange. All week I've been afraid of the charge, of the smile she promised me, of dying in here for a thing no one would ever know I did. But it's gone now, the fear, sitting across from you and your steady hands and the record that's going to outlive me. Because here's the thing I worked out on the cold walls years ago and forgot until just now, and you can write it down as the last thing I say if you like, since it's the truest. A sentry doesn't guard a door. Any fool with a sword can stand in a doorway. A sentry guards the people behind the door, that's the whole of it. That's the only oath that matters under all the other oaths. And on the one night it was asked of me, the one night in 14 years it was actually asked, I guarded the people behind the door, and the girl is alive, and the child is coming in the spring. And whatever they do to me now, that's done, that's real, that's mine, and no clever charge and no remembered smile can take it back out of the world. She said she'd remember me. Good, let her. I refused her at a door on a cold night, with my numb hands and my borrowed courage and a lie that was truer than the truth, and the girl lived. Let the most powerful woman in the realm remember, for the rest of her life, the one nobody who would not be a door. I was a wall. Write that down. Then go up the stairs and don't look back at me, and don't come again, and tell them the inner door held. Tell them it held.